Have you ever had a situation where at the time you almost felt a bit triumphant, but that situation haunted you for decades until you realized what the heck was going on? That happened to me. I had a situation that actually I thought of because I had come across this meme on Facebook. We didn't wear helmets. We just lay in the street unconscious until someone came and got us for dinner. And I started commenting, before I posted it. It took me down a path of something that had happened. And I wonder how many of you have had an experience like this. It was my first week of seventh grade, and I had been saving up forever to buy a 10-speed bicycle. Oh my gosh, I just thought of something else that's kind of strange. I didn't get the color I wanted. I got the color my dad liked. That's weird. I wonder if I need to kind of think about that. Anyway, that's just sort of beside the point. I saved up, got this 10-speed bike. I don't know if you remember or if you had those bikes that had rat trap pedals on them where you still, my gosh, I'm 63 years old. I still have the scars on my legs from those pedals. Anyway, I'm riding down Center Street in Arlington, Texas, from the home that I had lived in at that time. First year of seventh grade, so I must have been like 12 maybe. I'm riding, and all of a sudden, I'm on the ground. Something happened that made the back tire just fly up into the air and over the front tire, which threw me out into the ground. And I landed with my hands out, straight out. And I don't know how long I was there. It was September in Texas on black asphalt. If you have any idea what that feels like, you know the agony I was in just from being on the damn street. This meme made me think of that situation because, yeah, I'm lying in the middle of the street, hurt. I had really a badly hurt ankle that was black and blue, and I had broken my right arm. I didn't know it at the time, but I couldn't turn my arm, and I had a lot of pain in it. This woman that I didn't know, which you could do back then in the maybe early 70s. Well, I guess maybe not. There are serial killers then too, right? Anyway, this woman picked me up. She put my bicycle in the back of her car. I don't know how. She helped me into her car and drove me home. I went inside and I waited for my mom to come home, knowing, I guess, or thinking that she was going to take me to the hospital because I knew my arm was broken. So mom gets there, and my mother had this way of, whenever we would get sick, she was angry. She would get very angry when we were sick or we were hurt or we inconvenienced her in any way. She would get extremely angry. And I remember her coming in, and I told her, I said, Mom, I've broken my arm. Look at my leg. My ankle is like swollen to twice its size. I need to go to the hospital. I'm not taking you. And she just walked off. She didn't even come over to check my ankle, my arm, the road rash, anything. It was just, I'm not taking you. And I got to thinking about that. Why didn't she take me? Did we not have insurance? I'm trying to put this timeline together of when I lived in that house. Where did I live when I was in seventh grade? What job did my dad have when I was in seventh grade? I think he was already a corporate pilot. I'm not sure for whom. I don't know. It doesn't matter. I don't know if we had insurance. I don't know if they had the money to pay for me to go to the emergency department, or, which is really more likely, I don't think my mother wanted to take the time out of her day to take me to the hospital. So it was later, literally hours of begging and pleading with my mother to take me to the hospital. Mom, my arm's broken. No, it's not. You can look at it and pretty much tell my arm's broken. No, it's not. You don't need to go to the hospital. I'm looking at it today and thinking, why didn't you even bring me a bag of ice to put around my ankle that was obviously swelling at that time? It was like the size of a freaking elephant. But I didn't really think about that when I was a kid. For me, and this is really hard to say, but for me, that was normal in my family. I heard Sharon Osbourne say something the other day. Somebody asked her, with all the times that Ozzy had gone off the wagon with all of the things that had happened in their marriage, how she stood by him. And she said the family that she grew up in, for her, that was normal. It's really the first person I've ever heard that said that. And it really struck a chord with me. And it's hard to say. For me, that was normal. Trying to get my mother's attention was normal. Her not giving me the attention was normal. Her getting really upset when we got sick was normal. Her not taking me to the hospital was normal. That was my reality. And I just sort of thought that's the way things went. So finally, there is something that happened that made me realize not all families are the same, but that I'll tell you that in just a bit. Let me finish this drama. So finally, she put me in the car and we drove to the hospital, to the emergency department, Arlington Memorial Hospital, where my babies were born, two of my babies. She parked at the hospital. The parking lot was empty. Okay. It was freaking empty. Not like today where you have to hover for a spot. It was empty. And she parked at the very back, furthest point. At least it seemed so to me at the time, from the door that she could be. She got out of the car and started walking ahead of me into the hospital. And I got out of the car and I'm trying to make it. I'm kind of hopping on one foot. I'm grabbing other cars as I'm going along. I'm trying to catch up with my mom. And I don't remember if I asked her to wait. I don't remember anything really. What I do remember is a woman came out of the hospital on the way to her car, and she saw what was going on, and she gave my mom this look that was like, oh my gosh, if she could just unsubscribe my mother from life, she would have done it at that point. And the woman turned around immediately, went and got a wheelchair. She came and got me. And I saw her glare at my mom, and I was feeling like, well, I guess she told you. And then my mom tried to take the wheelchair, and the woman wouldn't allow her to. And she said, I've got this, since you evidently cannot wheel your daughter into the hospital. Words of that effect. This is like over 50 years ago. So I got in. We did the imaging. My ankle was not broken. It was just severely sprained. But my arm was broken. My right arm was broken. And at that, I don't know, do they still do regular casting these days? I am getting over a broken ankle and they just put me in a hard boot. But, they put me in a cast and I couldn't write. It's the first 8 weeks of school. And I can't remember how often our report cards come out. And that's going to come into play here in a little bit. But I couldn't do my homework. Up until that point, well, for most of school, I was a straight A, B student. B's usually in math. A's, if we had history, English, anything like that, I pretty much did really well. My mom was very angry with me that she had to write my homework because the way they casted me, I guess they do it differently now, but the way they put the cast on, that went over this part of your hand, there was no way I could hold a pencil or a pen to do my homework. There was just no way it could happen. So my mom, she would ask me the questions, like in history or geography. She would ask me the questions. I would read whatever I needed to, and she would write the answers down. Those were always my really easy subjects. And, I just love it. And those went pretty well, although mom was, really gruff. And I felt like a real imposition at that point because she made it blatantly clear she didn't want to help me. Then we got to math and we were doing some problems and I'm trying to figure it out. And she got so frustrated with me. It's kind of hard for me with math anyway to just look at a problem and tell you what the answer is. I'm one that has to sort of write it out and kind of try to figure it out. Seventh grade, I'm not sure what we were in, if we were in pre-algebra or algebra or what it was. But my mother got so frustrated with me. She told me to go to bed, that she would finish my homework. She would do my math every time I had math homework. Okay. I turned my homework in. Every class, straight A. Turned my math in, and I was not doing so great in math. So it came time for report cards. They used to send them home with the kids at that point, which as a parent, of kids that grew up in the 80s and 90s, I'm like, that was really dumb, but whatever. So they gave me my report cards, and I'm looking through them all. History, F. I mean, A in history, A in English, A in literature, A in geography, A in science. I was excused from PE because obviously I couldn't participate. And then the last one was math. And this was the first time and the last time this ever happened to me. Teachers were kind of cruel back then when I was in school. At least my math teacher was. I looked at my math and there was an F. And she didn't just write an F on it. It was in great big red ink. F. I didn't know what to say. She knew my mother was writing my answers for me, but I don't think she knew that my mother did my homework for her. I wouldn't have ratted my mom out for anything because I would know the wrath that would come with that. So I know I didn't tell her that. I get home and my dad, I think, must have been flying at that point because I don't think he was home. My memory seems to recall him coming home toward the end where my cast came off. And that was like really gross, an arm in a cast for however many weeks. That was disgusting. Anyway, back to the story. I go down rabbit holes. I took my report cards home and gave them to my mom. She's going through them. A, F. Great big freaking red ass F on my math. And when she saw that inside, I kind of giggled because it was like, I got you. You failed math. I would have gotten at least a B in math at that time, but I didn't. I failed. I had an F. And I got to thinking about that last night with this meme and this like kind of free range parenting thing. Why I would consider that normal behavior for a parent. Now, I have to admit, when my kids would get sick, I raised a ton of kids, a lot of foster kids, a lot of kids. And if anyone in the family got sick, it just is like we fell like dominoes. So if someone was throwing up or really sick, I was like putting a pot in their room and sliding them dinner, because if I got sick, there would be mutiny. It just couldn't happen. I always took my kids to the hospital. I always took them to the doctor. I didn't let them go into the doctor alone. And all of this stemmed from my childhood. But why? What does that say about the way I grew up? And I would be curious to see how many of you have had this experience where your life is your reality at that point, and you don't realize until you're grown and out that that's not normal behavior for a parent. That is a very dysfunctional, toxic family structure for kids, for families. I mean, that just is wrong. I think one of the things that kind of sparked me a little bit when that happened, I mean, I was in 7th grade, and I was, this was probably 4 years later, maybe. I went up to Cape Cod, and I spent the summer with my aunt and uncle. My uncle was a dentist, and I broke my toe doing something. I don't know what. I'm always breaking bones. And he took me to his dentist office, his dental office, excuse me, and he x-rayed my toe on his machine, his x-ray machine that he used to x-ray teeth on. And sure enough, my toe was broken. You know, what do you do with a broken toe? You just sort of tape it together and you just whatever. But they cared enough. My aunt and uncle cared enough at that point. They wanted to see if there was a problem. And you know, I'm kind of putting this together as I was writing this meme. I mean, the post before my commentary, I guess, before I posted this really innocent meme just meant to make people laugh. But it took me down this path of, wow, why did I feel like I got one up on my mom because she got an F on my homework? And why didn't I, at that time, which I know now as an adult, being 12 years old, your reality is what you're in. You don't really have the capability of saying, hey, this is really not a good situation, and this isn't the way normal families function. But trying to, you know, figure out what's wrong with me. You know, I already knew my mother didn't want me. She told me blatantly, I should never have gotten pregnant with you. I did not want kids. And whoa, I buried that for freaking ever. You know, and I would see certain ways she would treat my brothers. And I didn't realize until after my mom had died, maybe after my dad had died too. My brothers and I were talking, and we all sort of had similar experiences because each one of us had a different idea as to who the favorite child was, which I thought was kind of funny. I don't know, maybe that's common. But it wasn't until a lot of therapy and my therapist really pressuring me to speak about my childhood. I never wanted to go there. For me, it was normal, I thought, but something in me knew it wasn't, because why was I reluctant to speak about it? So finally, my therapist got me to talk about my childhood, and it was hard. It was really hard. It was a very scary box, a very scary closet to go into. There were no lights. Shining lights on that was really scary for me. And it's weird that I would think that there was nothing wrong. I mean, you would think that that would be a clue that there was something wrong with the way you grew up if you didn't want to talk about it and if you didn't want to open those boxes and find out what the heck happened. Well, I started opening those boxes with him, and with validation from her sisters, my aunts. You know, one of them, maybe both of them, in sometime in the last few years, have told me, We watch the way your parents treated you. We watch the way you were raised, but we couldn't do anything about it. And I understand that. I mean, this was the 60s and 70s. They couldn't do anything about it. My gosh, it would have started, for one, a freaking wildfire between my mother and her sisters. It would just have been absolutely horrible. And even in today's age, when I did foster care, a lot of the family members that saw what was going on in a family didn't call CPS to have these kids removed from the homes. So maybe that's just sort of a normal thing, but I totally get it why my aunts didn't do that. That wasn't a time or place for them to step into that role. Would it have been good? I don't know. I don't know if it would have been or not. I know I really wanted to model my family on the way I saw my aunts treating their kids. So that told me, my childhood wasn't so great. But opening those boxes, my gosh, this is what I came to realize with my aunts, both of aunts plural, validation. One of my aunts, my oldest aunt, Sandy, said, "Teri, you are an absolutely adorable, precious child. I don't know why your mother treated you the way she did." And my other aunt, I believe it was probably her, I know I've heard this from both of them, said basically the same thing. I was thrown off on my youngest aunt, Susan, and I didn't realize that until I look back, because I think she was probably 13 when I was born. She was about to turn 14 when I was born. So I was sort of dropped off on her a lot, I remember. So she and I were tight. We were close. Why do I forget where I am? Is that a sign of trauma? It is a sign of trauma, actually, especially when you dig into subjects that are traumatizing. But they both told me there was this my grandmother, who was 41 when I was born, was a single mother when my mom and her sisters were kids. So she worked all the time. She didn't get child support from my deadbeat grandfather. So she worked her butt off. She had her parents to help out, but my mom was at home with Sandy. And this is just kind of as I've put it together, it may be completely wrong. And it seems like I remember being told my youngest sister was with my great grandparents, her grandparents. So mom and Sandy, I don't know, it was just a real weird thing. They were very poor, very, very poor. Their big treat on Friday nights was to have cold hot dog weenies, cheese, and pinwheel cookies. I don't know if you know what those are, but my grandmother, oh my gosh, she used to buy them for me from when I was a kid. And they are so nostalgic for me. I don't care what is inside of them. If I see a pinwheel cookie, I have to have one, because it just brings back everything good about my grandmother. And it's just such a wonderful memory, but I don't have that with my mom. Why? I keep asking myself, why did I think that was normal? And it was wonderful when my aunts validated what they had seen. And the other day, I thought it was kind of funny. One of my aunts, my eldest aunt, sent me this Instagram reel with this woman. She's playing like this cool jazzy music, and she's got on this cool sweatshirt, and she's drinking a big, big glass of white wine. And she said, "Me, when my husband tries to tell me what to do, when I am the certified first child, first daughter, first niece, first granddaughter, and first something else." I think there were like 5 first. And that was me. And when my aunt sent me that, it really caught me off guard, but it made me cry, because and maybe she didn't really mean it this way, but this is the way I took it, was that she was telling me that I had an important place as the first niece in the family. Sorry, guys. Um, and I thought that reel was so dead on accurate. You know, I think in another episode somewhere I said something about, maybe it was in a short. I said something about oh, it was about my trauma tattoos. Uh, it was good that my grandmother wasn't alive when I got my first tattoo because she would have skinned me alive. But I was the first grandchild, so she probably wouldn't have, and that came with a lot of guilt of being the first grandkid, the favorite grandkid. But it came with a really heavy, it came with a lot of benefits, but it came with a very heavy sense of guilt because it was widely known by everyone. And when I was younger, I didn't really think of it that way until I got older. And I realized how grateful I was to be able to remember my grandmother. I think I was almost 16. She died on December 17th, 1977, around 4 in the morning, when that's a whole nother weird story. Um, wow, that's kind of like a spiritual story. I'll have to get into that sometime. Yeah. See, I did it again. So is this my trauma taking over my thoughts? Is my brain being hijacked by the trauma of these events I'm speaking of? But yeah, there was a lot of a very complex situation between my mom and my grandmother and me. But I didn't really have anything to do with them. I was a freaking child. I was a child. But as I got older and look back and hear my aunt's recollections and their validations, I can see why my mother would have had problems with me. I was getting the attention that my mom always wanted from her mother. I was an obstacle in my mom's life. I was born too early. They had just gotten married when she got pregnant, and here comes baby Teri. My mom used to tell me that I was a screaming, horrible baby. And my aunt said, "No, you weren't. You were the exact opposite. You were absolutely precious." So that really made me feel better, but I didn't know if they were just saying it to make me feel better or if they really meant it. I mean, there was one time I remember, and I may have said this in another episode, that I was in the backyard of this house we lived in Midland. So I had to have been 2 or 3 years old. And in Midland, Texas, as I'm sure it is in many, many towns, there are alleys behind the houses where you keep your trash cans, and that's where the trash men can come and pick up the garbage and get rid of it. So I was outside one day. I was itty bitty because I think we moved from that house when I was around 4 or 5. And I wanted to come in. My mother always kept the door locked, and we could not get into the house. I wanted to come in. It was freaking hot in the Texas sun, and I wanted to come in. I wanted water. And my mother opened the door and she said, "You need to stop it. You need to be quiet. Stop your yelling." And it's like, "Mom, I want to come in." And I was told, and I think I have said this on episodes before, I was told, "I'll put you in the trash can." And I remember very clearly saying, "I'll just tell them to bring me back home." And my mom got like this look and she said, "They don't speak English." I tell you, that was the last time I asked my mom to go inside the house. That was hard, and that haunted me for freaking ever. That still hangs over my head a lot. And it's hard because adult Teri logically sees all of this, right? As I'm sure you as an adult can logically see the situations that have happened in your life. But what a lot of us don't realize is we need to take the time to reparent that child in us, because that 5-year-old, that 3-year-old, that 12-year-old is still a part that is controlling some of our actions and our emotions. Is it easy to do? No. Have I accomplished it? No. Am I working on it? Every single day. I really do try to take care of myself. You know, I was never celebrated as a kid on my birthday by my mom. I can remember a party or two. So my birthday's always been really has been special to me, but I don't remember my brothers really having birthday parties either. So I always made sure my kids had like the cake they wanted, the dinner they wanted. Before I had a bazillion kids, I went all out and would have like these bouncy houses and these huge like Tori Spelling birthday parties for my kids. And then I had a ton of kids. I'm like, okay, can't do that because I've got a birthday or 2 or 3 every month. So we're going to have to settle for your favorite dinner and whichever cake you want. So that's what we did. I can remember one year my mother got me a cake. I was 16 years old. She put the cake in front of me. She walked away. I think my dad took a picture. So I'm there 16 years old with a store-bought cake alone on my birthday. And I remember it was so funny because I thought that was normal, right? We live in what we consider our reality. To me, that was normal to get a store-bought cake. And one year, my eldest aunt, my Aunt Sandy, she said that she would make me a cake, any cake I wanted. And I thought that was so weird because you didn't make cakes for people on the birthday. You bought them a cake from the grocery store on their birthday is, kind of the way I felt. And now I've come to realize that cake my aunt was going to make me would have been made with love and compassion. And it would have been made for me and not just picked up as an afterthought at the grocery store. So I don't know, Sandy, if you're watching this and if you remember that situation, I've reached out to both my aunts and one of them, I don't really think the relationship will really come back in, and that's okay. I don't have time for really drama. But my other aunt and I, there came a point when I had to take off my mother's cloak of her feelings for her sisters, and I had to see my aunts the way they really were through my eyes and not through the eyes of my mom, not through the filter of my mom or my dad. I had to see them through me. And when that all sort of occurred, I went through a hellacious fall, as most of you know. But when that occurred, I wrote both of my aunts and I told them how much I appreciated everything they did to me, for me, how much I learned from them, and that I was so sorry that I treated them through the lens of my mother's eyes. One of them got back with me and, we text and talk, and she's the one that sent me that really cool Facebook or Instagram reel with the girl saying, I'm the certified first child, first daughter, first granddaughter, first niece. That made me cry. And I don't think here I'm going to cry again. I don't think she realizes how much it meant to me that she sent that to me. And we text back and forth. She let me know she was watching the Monks Walk for Peace. And that's something I treasure for because for far too long I was very ugly. I was very hardened. I was very I think I was protecting my mom maybe, and I was holding things against my aunts that I didn't know what it was. I just knew my mother had this issue with them, but I never did. And that's a real sobering thought when you realize you've treated someone with utter disdain, not from your own experiences, but from the experiences of someone else. You know, my mom and dad died relatively quickly. Um, what am I trying to say? My mother died in the hospital unexpectedly. She went in for stitches and didn't come out. We have differing opinions on exactly what happened there. However, I spoke with a medical examiner. My dad and I spoke with a medical examiner, and um, there were some very big mistakes made in my mother's case. And then my dad, when I got down, he's like, we're going to finish your mom's house and then I'm going to go be with her. She's my best friend. I want to be with her. So they died within like 13 months of each other, 13, 14 months. And I had a lot of anger, and I felt so alone because my parents had died, even though our relationship had been so hard. You know, that last 13, 14 months with my dad was one of the best gifts of my life. But I think the pain of losing them, the pain of losing my grandson, the pain of what I had gone through, so much trauma, being forced to raise kids that I did not want, that I knew I didn't have that didn't sound right. I didn't have the mental capacity to raise more children, but I was forced to raise these kids. I did the best I could. You know, everyone will tell you she did the best she could. So I think I had a lot of anger within me that unfortunately I directed at two people that were probably the only two people left on this earth that I meant something to and that I loved with all my heart. And sometimes I think we lash out at people we love the most because you don't fear them leaving. Well, they did. And I did. You know, we had a break in that relationship, and it was really hard. And then something else happened. There was a very toxic family member that spread a lot of there was a lot of, well, I don't even go into it. There were a lot of other factors that fit into the relationship with my cousins and my aunts and my family and me that aren't true. They never happened. They were huge exaggerations. I can't fix that. The only thing I can do is acknowledge my role in being a horrible niece and apologize to them and tell them how much they meant to me, especially now that I don't know if what is Sandy? I don't know if she's 83 or will be 83 or 84. I think she's going to be 83. And my other aunt, gosh, if I'm 63, she must be almost 80. So, I know my time is limited with them. With my uncle, I've been able to actually visit him several times. And, I plan on getting down to visit him as much as I can because that was another relationship that was torn from me. Even though he's not my blood uncle, he was my uncle basically from the time I was a child. So there's no difference in my heart between him and my aunts. I love him so much. But yeah, I kind of got off track there. But yeah, I just didn't know. And I had to, I think last night happened for several reasons. I've been avoiding coming back to this podcast. I really didn't know how it was going to affect me when I went into it with all of the subjects that I delved into, especially with my past, especially with my trauma, my cutting, the death of my son, things like that. I don't think I realized it was going to open boxes that I was not completely healed from. So I took last year off. Last year pretty much hit me with the death of my son. He died 5 years ago, but last year was the 4th year. And I think grief is so weird. I was so angry with Portland for so long, but the grief hit me really hard last year. And it was really hard to come back to the podcast and say, hey, this is what's gone on. I am going to try to be much more regular. I hope this makes sense. It's saying trying to reconnect. I may have lost my internet. Hopefully this is going to stay on my computer and it will upload. We'll see. Okay, so I just have been spending the last 15 minutes to try to get back online. My internet went out. I've been having a lot of issues with it. Anyway, that's not your problem. That's mine. Hopefully I'll get that taken care of. Have no idea where I was when it stopped. So I'm going to try and trim it to what makes sense. But I wanted to come back and tell you guys thank you. And I really appreciate it. If you guys would like, subscribe, push this out, help this video and this content get seen by other people that may be experiencing some of the same issues. Because if there's anything I can do with the trauma I've been through and what I've learned from it, and I don't help someone else that might need it, in my opinion, that would be very wrong of me to do. I don't want people going through what I went through. So I'll try to trim this to where it makes sense. And I'll see you guys next time. Thanks a lot for hanging out. And until then.